I could see my reflection in its eyes as I locked eyes with it, and it slowly started retracting its hand, but it kind of froze for a minute when we first locked eyes, and then it started slowly retracting. His hand falls to its side, and then I see it almost like the room starts to like vibrate almost. Like my teeth and everything, the bed itself started kind of vibrating briefly, and it slowly lifted off of the ground, still keeping eyes with me the entire time.
Welcome to Piercing the Shroud podcast, a testimonial archive documenting firsthand experiences that challenge the rigid mainstream understanding of reality. Each episode focuses on the raw events of a single experience, when it happened, where it occurred, and what was perceived, step by step, with as much sensory detail as possible. Worldviews, theories, and interpretations are intentionally set aside so the experience can speak for itself. I'm your host, CJ Hazley. Grounded and logical, yet I've had anomalous and mystical experiences that I cannot deny the reality of. From seeing UFOs and advanced technologies to psychic experiences like telepathy, precognition, and psychokinesis and more, I've seen firsthand that reality is much more complex than what we're conditioned to believe, and I'm not the only one. That's why my mission is to build an archive of firsthand testimony for curious minds, experiencers, and future researchers alike. These are real people sharing real experiences that don't fit the mainstream view of what's possible, and their stories deserve to be taken seriously and documented carefully. Welcome to Piercing the Shroud podcast. Let's dive in. So now we will start with your experience. What classification would you say your experience falls under?
When you say classification, do you mean like...
Kind of like ET encounter for this one?
Yeah, I would definitely say ET encounter for this one. I guess it'd be ET encounter and a little bit of astral, mainly. ET encounter. The focus of the experience is ET.
All right. When did this experience occur?
It happened probably about 2.5 years ago when I was back in Texas before moving to New Mexico. I lived in my Texas apartment in Baytown, on the bottom floor apartment specifically, not the upper floor one. But I was there when I had the experience.
Was it day or night?
It was morning. It was early morning. It was early morning when I had the experience.
What time, if you had to guess?
I had to guess maybe right at sunrise as the sun was coming up. So at that time, maybe 6:30, something like that.
How long did the experience last?
It felt long while I was experiencing it. So it could have felt like an hour or two, but it could have only been 5 minutes. But during the actual experience, it felt a lot longer than, it seemed
And
to be.
that's just that's including the astral part or even the encounter with the entity?
I would say it's both, including the astral part and the entity. It lasted a lot longer, probably about like 2 hours, I would say it felt like overall.
Okay.
I
So repeat that.
said at least from what I can recall from the experience.
On that same vein, did it feel like time was distorted or normal, like slowed, sped up?
No, it felt distorted. It felt a lot slower than normal. You know how
Okay.
sometimes you can feel like situations where you're like, oh, things are going a lot faster than they were, or things are going a lot slower than you think they are.
Mhm.
I think it was like that. It was like time itself had slowed down, and it felt like it was crawling in that particular experience.
So was this experience an isolated event, or was it connected with any other experiences?
I've had other ET experiences, but this particular one, I don't believe it was connected to any other specific experience. Like it was just a standalone experience for this one.
Okay. And then now we'll move on to where. So you already disclosed some of that and stated that you were in Baytown, Texas, in your apartment complex. Was this upper floor?
No, I was on the bottom
First
floor
floor?
when this happened. I was in my bottom floor apartment in Texas. I want to say it was summer. I want to say. To
Okay.
see summer at the time. Yeah, back in my apartment. I was in my bedroom. My bedroom was right next to a window, massive window on the side of my bedroom. That's important for the actual encounter. So, but yeah, it was on the bottom floor.
Okay, and then just for this is a question I'm going to ask in every interview, and it's more for classification purposes. Were you under the influence of any psychedelics, drugs, or alcohol?
At the time, no, that would only be alcohol if I was
Uh,
under it.
right.
I got to specify that too.
Okay, and then uh, this happened indoors
Yes, it happened indoors
in your bed.
or indoors. Yeah, I was in my bed, and the entity was to my left hand side, right in front of my window, or inside the room with me, but on the side of my window.
You were alone, correct?
I was alone. Yes.
And then how was the lighting? Was it pretty dark in the room, or
No, it was. There was enough light coming in from the window from the rising sun that it was pretty well lit. I had left my window shades open, so there was enough light that had come into the room that it was pretty well lit.
okay, okay, the window shades open? And then were you awake or dreaming? You said it was some mix of the two.
I was astral traveling prior to that, and I was awoken to encountering the ET in my room. But I was woken by the entity.
Okay, all right. And now we will move into the actual experience itself. So tell us where this starts. It starts with the astral projection experience.
Yes. And what I can recall, I'll just start from the beginning. I was on the astral plane. Remember being my astral body was flying through like a sea of colors and everything else, and I was moving through. I had just moved through a sea of colors. I had entered in like some scenery, some beautiful wilderness, areas of space. I had traveled through stars, and then all of a sudden, I had this weird
So,
sense of
so
anxiety.
what was this going by fast? All these different scenes, or was that like a whole prolonged experience itself?
It was kind of prolonged. There were segments of it where I was like jumping past different points, but there were some points where I would slow down and experience it more. Like the sea of colors was pretty quick. Then when I get to the stars, I would kind of linger with the stars, and then I would linger with the wilderness, and then I would jump through like different things, different locations, and then I would have the initial experience where I remember is I had this weird sense of anxiety and dread suddenly just fill my existence to the point where it's like a point of panic, and all of a sudden it was like a cord or something, or I had to like somebody threw a lasso around me for an analogy. It was around my waist and yanked me back. And I remember everything just speeding by me in a blink and then like landing in my body with a jolt, my eyes flying open. And almost instinctually, I looked to the left, just kind of turned my head just a little bit and looked to the left. And standing over me with its hand outreached like this, it had four fingers, longer fingers. It had was this tall, pale gray skinned figure with solid black eyes, kind of no hair anywhere that I could see, almost looked completely naked, or it looked naked. It it locked I could see my reflection in its eyes, and it locked eyes with me as I locked eyes with it, and it slowly started retracting its hand, but it had already been retracting as I locked
Mm,
eyes, but its hand continued moving. It kind of froze for a minute when we first locked eyes, and then it started slowly retracting, and it just let its hand fall this entire time. Our eyes are locked the entire time. His hand falls to its side, and then I see it almost like the room starts to like vibrate almost. My teeth and everything, the bed itself started kind of vibrating briefly, and it slowly lifted off of the ground, still keeping eyes with me the entire time. Slowly lifted off the ground and floated backwards to my window. It didn't break the window, did anything. I watched it phase through the window. And like as it did, its body disappeared beyond the window. and the last thing was left was its head. Its head was the last thing that left. And the entire time, it still locked eyes with me. The entire time. And when its head finally fully disappears and fades from view and I can no longer see it, I just kind of sit there, breathe, blink, and I just go, I'm too tired for this. I'll deal with it later, and just roll back over and go right back to sleep.
How long would you say it was between you waking up and seeing him and him phasing through the wall completely?
It felt longer, honestly, because that was also kind of felt like time slowed down a little bit in that situation. But I would say realistically, it was probably like maybe 2 minutes, maybe
Okay,
three.
so you think it might
Oh,
have been that slow? He was retracting that slow. You got to actually see his physical form or
yeah,
the presentation of his body
yeah.
for
I get
about
to
2
see
minutes.
everything. He was literally like tall, lanky, long arms, pale gray skin. Like I said, 4 fingers, longer fingers. I got to see fully. I got to see his face. He didn't have a nose. It was more like slits. And his face kind of
Mhm.
more like reptilian style, like slits, I guess the best way to describe it. Kind of a smaller mouth, angled head and jaw, kind of more pointed, almost with like a more rounded, bulbous sized head.
Okay, so, like,
Fire
kinda
time,
like
huh?
like, was it, like, disproportionately big, or was it not like the gray aliens, or kinda like the classical gray for the
Kind of
bulb?
like it was kind of like the classical gray. Usually the classical grays are kind of depicted as kind of short. This one looked like a really tall version of a gray. He was probably about 6.5 to 7 feet tall because
Okay.
his shoulders were hunched slightly as he was standing over me. Like he was hunched a little in the upper portion of his body as he was leaning and reaching out toward me. And when he was retracting, he kind of straightened a little bit while he was still locked eyes with me before he lifted up off the ground and faded out. And when he was completely gone, that subtle vibration that I felt disappeared with him. And then this is a
Okay.
day the next when I finally woke up a couple hours later and got up and I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, get a shower. When I was brushing my teeth, I looked in the mirror and I get close to the camera, but the entire left side of my facial hair and my left eyebrow had turned snow white and they remain that way. No matter how much I shave or whatever, it grows back in white. Prior, it had been my normal, like brownish, reddish facial hair.
The color of the rest of it.
But ever since then, it's just been solid snow white.
So that didn't gradually happen, it was just, like,
No,
it was immediately.
it was just immediate overnight. Like it was fine the day before, and then when I woke up the next morning, it was just solid white. And ever since then, no matter how much I shave it, it grows back in white.
Snow White immediately after.
Yeah, immediately the next morning, snow white. And also, I couldn't shake the image of this entity from my mind. It was like it was burned into my psyche. Like I could not forget him. And even now, like it's been, like I said, like 2 years, 2.5 years. Ever since then, I can still very detailed remember what he looked like
Mhm.
and the whole scene play out. It was like burned into my psyche. I
Can you
don't think I'll
just
ever forget it.
let's dive into his physical form a little bit more than, like, how would you, like, describe, like, the texture of his skin and, like, the exact shade?
His skin looked smooth, very smooth. There was kind of a shine to it almost, it seemed like it had. Some of the reflecting sun, like the morning sun, was reflecting off his skin almost very faintly, but it looked like the color ash, like the color of ash whenever you burn fire, of how ash
Mm.
looks like. That's what its skin looked like. It was very ashen gray, but very smooth and shiny. There wasn't any hair that I could see anywhere on his body, and he was very skinny, like very lanky, but it wasn't bony. I couldn't
Okay,
see
so
I couldn't see bone or anything like that. It was more of like sinewy, like muscle, like very
mm,
lanky, like sinewy muscle.
okay, so he seemed, like, kinda muscly?
Yeah.
Okay, and the proportion of his eyes were very large? So would you say, like, as large as, like, the standard presentation of a gray or like bigger?
They were definitely large, like the standard presentation of a gray, but I think his eyes seemed more proportional to his height, his overall size,
Mm.
so they
Mhm.
looked almost a little bit bigger in his head,
Right.
and his head was, like I said, kinda bigger, more bulbous, but it seemed to be, like, not necessarily bigger on top, but more kinda bigger on the sides,
Mm.
almost like you know how a light bulb looks? Like a top of a light bulb?
Mhm.
Kinda looks like that, like, it's
Okay, so, like,
kinda
you're not
looks like
seeing,
a
like,
light
the
bulb.
whole big head. It's
Yeah,
angled back
yeah,
and, like, kinda, like, behind it. Okay. Kinda like how our skull extends, but, like, going further back.
yeah, there it was, like, a little bit further back and a little bit bigger on the sides, so I couldn't see the whole thing because of the angle he was facing me with, but it looked more, like, oblong, kinda light bulby in my head was the best closest act
Mhm. No, that
equation
makes sense.
to get to.
And then you said the face was angular?
Yeah, it's you know how, like, the stereotypical, like, masculine man kinda has, like, the chiseled kinda, like, square jaw? Instead
Mhm.
for him, it was more angled, more pointed almost. He did have a jaw, like a jawline, but it was more angled and pointed compared to more square like a human.
Okay.
This one was more angled, like, you know how
Going
they would
straight
show, like,
down
elf,
to
I
the
guess,
chin. Sorry,
and
go ahead.
you know how they show, like, an elf in, like, fantasy fiction, the more,
Mm.
like, angular? It kinda had that with its face. It had no nose, it had, like, very fine, like, slits that were more angled, kinda where my nostrils would be, but they were like slits, and his mouth was surprisingly small. I thought it'd be bigger. His mouth was a little small, kinda stood out amongst the rest of his face, but
So did he have, like, pronounced lips, or was it
not much, no, he had lips, but it was more very very thin lips, but he never really or it never really moved its mouth. It more of stayed almost neutral expression the whole time it was looking at me. And as it lifted up off the ground, its mouth never moved once. It just had a neutral expression. I may have saw some kinda, like, recognition or something flash through its eyes when we first locked eyes. It was almost like surprise, like, "Oh, he's awake," kinda thing. And then
Mhm.
the surprise dissipated away, and we just kept eyes locked as he floated up and phased through the wall and disappeared. I don't know
And
what the hell
then
he was doing.
throughout that, you said he body posture changed from hunched over to standing more straight up or completely straight up?
He was hunched when I first saw him when I opened my eyes. And as he realized that I could see him, that we were locked eyes, he slowly kind of rolled his shoulders back and kind of stood up straighter, almost in like a, I guess the best one. My first thing kind of my mind is more like a superior, like defiant posture almost to be like, like, oh, I see you. Like, I know you see me kind of thing, but there's nothing you're going to do kind of thing. Like, that was the kind of vibe I was getting. Like, he was trying to tell me, oh, I know you see me, but there's nothing you can do about it kind of thing.
Okay, okay. Yeah, can you tell me more about that? Like, kinda like the energy you felt like he was emanating?
Like, I mentioned that vibration,
Mhm,
that
yeah,
was
I
what
wanna
I
hear
was
more about
feeling,
that.
like, there was like, the vibration almost intensified for a little bit after he straightened his back and shoulders. I'm assuming it was more of, like, a way he was trying to, like, subtly intimidate me or something. That's the vibe I was getting from that. He wasn't necessarily giving off, I guess, anger or malicious toward me, but it definitely didn't seem to be friendly.
More like
More like
superiority?
challenging. It was more like challenging. Like he was trying to
Mm,
challenge me with his presence. He was like, "I know you see me, and if you try anything, it's gonna be something you're not expecting." Or he more viewed me as like a threat to him, maybe because it was challenging, but there was also it felt like an underlying tone of like, "I don't want to have conflict with you, but I will if I need to,"
mhm.
kind of vibe given it. And then in my head, I was thinking the same thing too. I'm like, "What the is this guy? Is this thing doing in my room? You better get out of here right now." And I was just kind of staring him down. And then
Yeah, let's go deeper into that as well. Like, so what's going through your head as you wake up and your eyes gravitate towards this presence that you felt pull you out of the astral, and
Yeah.
you see him, and like what hits you?
It was like my body instinctually reacted to his presence and I got pulled back to it. And because of that, my heart rate is already going pretty rapid because I was so suddenly yanked back to my body. But the weird thing was that when I immediately looked over at him, along with like how time kind of seemed to slow down, my heart rate dropped rapidly to like a stable. And I was more of like just kind of meeting him on equal terms almost. The first thought that went through my head was, holy shit, this thing's in my room. The second thing was like I was trying to like figure out what species it was, what kind of alien this was, why is it here, kind of thing like that. But that was very rapid. That's why I said it felt longer than it actually probably was, because I was having all those thoughts run through my head while its hand was retracting. And then when about the time its hand probably reached here as he was putting it down and after he had straightened his shoulders, I was no longer trying to think of what he was anymore. It was more of I was making like a mental statement to him. I was saying, "You're not welcome here." I
Mm.
was saying, "You need to leave my apartment now." And that was when his tone shifted and he started getting like defiant towards me, almost challenging to me. And I stood my ground. I said, "You," in my head, I'm like, tone and vibe I'm giving off mentally too was, "You're not welcome here. You need to leave now." And shortly after I made that final declaration was when he started lifting up off the ground, still emitting that challenging aura, but he was retreating at the same time as he phased through the wall. And then once he was completely gone, I was just like really tired and just overwhelmed with everything. And I was like, you know what? This is something I'm going to unpack when I wake up again because I still got like 3 hours until I need to wake up. So I just went, fuck it, and just rolled over and just went right back to sleep. Closed my eyes. Within seconds, I was out again.
So was this on a work day?
Yes. I think. It was either a work day or it was a Friday night or like a Friday or no, Friday going into Saturday. So it would have been a Saturday morning.
Okay,
Try
so
to
not
keep
a work day.
yeah, not a work day. I try to keep from that moment, I had started trying to keep like a tighter schedule on waking up earlier and not sleeping so
Mm.
late in the day. So I'd have more time in the day to do stuff. So it was pretty early when I woke up. So I was like, okay, maybe I can get another hour or two of sleep and then wake up when my alarm goes off. And that's what I did. And then
You
the
said,
next morning,
"How
that's when I
dare
found
you awaken me before my alarm?"
pretty much, yeah. I was like, "How dare you come into my house and wake me up before my alarm goes off?"
Okay, actually, let's describe the sensation of the vibration you were experiencing from him a little bit more.
I was literally just thinking that as you were thinking about that as you stepped away. Mind reader. You remember? I was gonna say like the vibration, it felt like it was very subtle vibration that kind of shook my body or my mind, like body and mind almost like and it felt like a pressure. You know the pressure you feel when you kind of dive underwater?
Mm, mm,
Like that overall pressure on your body and in your ears and stuff like that. It was something like that, but
okay, almost
not
like an
as intense.
atmospheric pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, like an atmospheric kind of pressure, it felt like.
Okay, so that's the, like, vibration you felt like he was emanating, and, like, that's the is that the only sensation it put, like, in your body?
It did the vibration, it did like the atmospheric pressure. I mean, I remember like the feelings of like him feeling like challenging toward me, almost
Mhm,
like daring me to do something almost. So there was that kind of intensity to the situation, but my body wasn't reacting to him
mhm,
like the standard you would get if somebody walked up to you and threatened to fight you kind of thing. Like the fight or flight didn't kick in. It was more of like, I'm too tired and I don't want to deal with this kind of mentality I had.
So it was more of like a like standing your ground and just like projecting the intention for him to leave, kind of like you might like react more like in like the dream state or astral.
Yeah, it's usually how I be in the astral plane. I don't really. There's very few times where I have ever experienced fear or the fight or flight in astral plane. There's a lot of fighting that I do in the astral plane, but never like that instinctual like fear reaction from me, like adrenaline
Hmm.
or anxiety spike. It's very rare. It's more of me just being more nonchalant toward things and just being like, you can't fuck with me because I'm gonna fuck with you instead. Or like
Hmm.
I'm gonna beat your ass kind of thing. But more like nonchalant about it. Be like, all right, I'll just go kind of thing.
Do you feel like we have skipped over any important bits in discussing the sensory details or the emotional experience?
No. I mean, I guess I could probably talk about how I felt afterwards the next day when
Yeah.
when the image of it was in my head. Like I was pretty much stuck on thinking about it like all day the next day. Like I couldn't get his image out of my head. I still can't when I think about it. But now it's not as bad as it was in the first, like the day after the encounter.
Did it frighten
Wasn't
you?
any, huh?
Did it frighten you?
No, it didn't really frighten me or give me anxiety. It was more of like a confusion, more of confusion and interest. More like,
Mm,
why did this thing come to me? What did it want? Why was its hand outstretched to me? What was it going to do if I hadn't woke up? Why did my astral body react so violently and come back in a defensive manner? Why did it do that? Why did I wake up instinctually and look over immediately at it and lock eyes with it? Why was it doing that? Of course, I never got the answers to that. I mean, I have theories,
mhm.
but that's a whole different discussion.
Alright, then I suppose we'll move into who are you?
My name is Cade, Cade Costlow. Just as of that experience, I was working in logistics, but now I've moved to New Mexico, the home of ET, famous ET encounters. So hopefully I have more, but here I'm just doing construction, just waterline pipe replacement and bursting, and some drone operation work to go with it too, but not like the flying around like government drone kind of thing, like a little crawler drone that you put in pipes and drive up and down the pipe and take pictures and video.
Okay. And hobbies and interests?
I play video games. I also like to build models like Warhammer 40K or Gundam models. I love like mechas are one of my favorite genre when it comes. I like anime too. And mecha and shonen are like my two top favorite ones. I like to write when I can bring myself to. I like to draw when I can bring myself to. I like designing and creating characters, especially world settings and stuff like that. Play Magic the Gathering, card games, a lot of video games, like I said. I also like to read about like folklore, like local folklore and legends and like cryptids and alien encounters and like supernatural stuff. I love all that kind of stuff. I love learning about like magic, supernatural things, everything else. I also like martial arts. I trained for a couple years in Wing Chun.
And then would you say you've had prior similar experiences to this one?
I've had prior experiences mainly on the astral plane. I've had a lot of astral plane experiences with different entities and creatures and everything else, aliens, AI, monstrosities, angels, demons, devils, all that kind of stuff. Like I've had a lot, gods, goddesses, a
But
lot of different things.
it usually stays within the realm of, astral projection. It's not still doesn't carry into your physical environment when you wake up.
Usually, no. I have had a prior encounter in the physical body with a UFO, but
Okay, but no other
usually it
things
does not
that
turn to my physical body. No.
okay.
Usually, it's the encounters usually remain on the astral plane.
Are there any witnesses to the experience that you had or people that you told, like, very shortly after?
I mentioned it to believe my friend Grayson and possibly Travis, my friend Travis, afterwards too, but no direct witnesses to it because I live alone. I don't have a wife
Mhm.
or anything, so at the time I was just living alone. So there was no one else. I mean, I have my dog, but she could technically be considered a witness, but she didn't. I
She
don't
didn't
remember if she reacted. I don't remember if she reacted or not. I was too focused on the entity.
and she wasn't in the room at the time, correct?
This was probably when she was still being put in her kennel at night.
Okay.
So she probably was still in her kennel. So her kennel was in the other room at the time.
Mhm.
So I don't believe she was in the room when the entity was there. And if she was, then she was a deep sleeper, or he was just so silent that she didn't hear him. That too.
Kit's not exactly energetically present.
No, yeah, I wouldn't say that she is. I would say she's
Not
very.
much of an empath, that one.
Yeah, she's not much of an empath. She's a little turd. Is there anything you have questions about that you want to ask me? Maybe I can clarify some things, or maybe I can add more details based on the questions you asked me.
I guess one. So, despite the strangeness of the experience and the fact that when you woke up and saw it there, you wanted it to leave, you are still you expressed an openness to more experiences of this nature.
Yes, it was more of telling him that he was, or it. I keep saying him. It that it maybe it wasn't him. I don't know. Maybe that's why I keep saying it. But I was telling it. It was more of me saying you're not allowed on my property, kind of thing, while I'm
Mhm.
asleep, without me giving you permission to be here. More so than me saying I don't want any encounter whatsoever with you. I am definitely open to more encounters, and I would like to speak to them. Actually, be able to like
Mhm.
you're on the astral plane or in physical plane, like they come to me physically, and we can actually sit down and have a conversation. I doubt that'll happen, but sit down and actually have a discussion about things. Like I'm asking questions. I have a lot of questions I want to ask.
Yeah, I would like for this podcast to eventually, like, segue into interviewing some aliens about their human encounters.
That would be kind of cool, for sure. If that's the thing you could do, or if you could find some aliens to come online, I'd watch those episodes for sure.
All right, I think we'll probably end it there. Thank you for coming on and giving your testimony about this experience, Cade.
Yeah, of course.
And
Thank you for having me.
we'll have you back on to talk about some of your others.
Looking forward to it.